The doors to Netherfield didn't just open, they swung. Wide, dramatic, cinematic. And there she was, Elizabeth Bennet, standing on the marble threshold, dripping mud like she was auditioning for the role of disheveled but defiant heroine. Across the hall, lit up by chandelier glow, was Fitzwilliam Darcy. Tall, immaculate, not a hair daring to move out of place. If Elizabeth looked like she'd just fought off a thunderstorm, because, well, she had, Darcy looked like he'd fought off nothing in his life. Not the weather, not discomfort, not even the concept of small talk. And then it happened. They locked eyes. Time stretched. The air grew heavy. Somewhere, in the narrator's head at least, a K-drama violin swelled. Lizzie, mud on her hem, chin high, staring him down with the stubborn fire of someone who refuses to lose. Darcy, dry and pristine, staring back with the icy curiosity of a man inspecting an unfamiliar bug. If tension were a perfume, the hallway was suffocating on it. Darcy's face didn't move, not even a twitch. His eyes flickered over her boots, then up to her rain-soaked curls clinging to her cheeks. His eyebrows, though, they twitched, barely, half a millimeter. To anyone else, meaningless. To Elizabeth, it screamed judgment, disdain, possibly even mockery. Elizabeth straightened her shoulders, water dripping onto the marble floor, her boots leaving faint, dirty outlines with every shift of weight. If he was going to judge her, she'd give him a full performance. Her inner monologue was practically shouting, "Yes, I am soaked. Yes, I walked 3 miles in the mud. And yes, I still look better than you. Write it down, Mr. Darcy." The moment lasted too long, too charged, too dramatic. And then the spell cracked, because the Bingley sisters swept in. Caroline and Louisa floated across the floor like synchronized figure skaters in pearls and chiffon. They were glossy, polished, untouched by anything as mortal as rain. Their perfume hit the air before their words did. Caroline's smile was wide enough to show teeth, but her eyes sparkled with barely concealed glee. Louisa's gaze dipped to Elizabeth's mud-splattered skirt, then up again with a kind of tight, polite pity that burned hotter than open disdain. "Your sister is upstairs," Caroline said, voice smooth as buttercream. "How thoughtful." Translation, "I see you, and I hope your pearls choke you in your sleep." The sisters ushered her upstairs, their polite chatter buzzing in her ears like gnats. Elizabeth didn't bother to respond beyond the occasional dry, "uh-huh," or "how kind." She was saving her energy for Jane. Upstairs, the air shifted. The grandeur faded into the intimacy of a guest chamber. Jane was cocooned in fine sheets, her skin pale but glowing with that delicate, ethereal look only Jane could pull off while running a fever. She looked like one of those Instagram girls who post sick day selfie and somehow still manage to look editorial. Elizabeth dropped into a chair beside the bed, dripping onto the plush carpet. "You've been here 5 minutes and already turned into a damsel in distress. Mom's probably down there drafting a seating chart for your wedding." Jane smiled faintly, her voice soft. "Don't tease." Then she coughed delicately, which only made Lizzie roll her eyes harder. "She'll take that cough as a sign from the universe. Next thing you know, she'll be shopping for tiaras." They sat in the warmth together for a while, Lizzie adjusting Jane's blanket, smoothing her hair, the way only sisters can without a word exchanged. For a moment, it was calm, almost tender. But of course, downstairs was chaos waiting for her. Because downstairs, the Bingley sisters had not finished their performance. The parlor at Netherfield wasn't cozy. It wasn't warm. It was staged. Every chair angled just so, every candle flickering like it had been paid to perform. The walls were covered in portraits of long dead people who looked like they charged interest. This was not a room for comfort, it was a room for display. And into that room walked Elizabeth Bennet, leaving faint little ghost prints of mud on the polished floor, while the Bingley sisters gave her a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Caroline, all pearls and posture, gestured toward the sofa with a little flourish. "You must be exhausted, Miss Bennet, after such exertion." Her voice dripped with the kind of sweetness that makes your teeth hurt. Elizabeth matched her smile, sat down, and crossed one ankle over the other, letting her damp hem brush the pristine upholstery like an act of rebellion. "Oh, it was nothing, just a little weather." Translation: "Yes, I brought mud into your temple of cleanliness. Live with it." Louisa perched beside Caroline, hands folded neatly in her lap. Still, such dedication. Walking 3 miles in the rain. Very unusual. Elizabeth tilted her head, voice syrupy. "Family makes the unusual worth it." Darcy, in his corner near the fireplace, finally looked up from his wine. His eyes flicked toward her, unreadable, then back down. The man's emotional range was about as visible as a locked phone screen. Caroline, sensing his attention, leaned in. "Mr. Darcy, don't you think it's admirable to walk through mud for one sister?" Darcy set his glass down. "Admirable enough." His tone was flat, clipped, like each word had been individually ironed. Elizabeth's eyebrow twitched. "Admirable enough?" Was that praise or judgment disguised as politeness? Knowing Darcy, probably both. She smiled sweetly at him. "High praise indeed. I'll add it to my resume." Caroline's laugh rang through the room, delicate, tinkling, and so obviously rehearsed it could have been written on a teleprompter. Louisa followed with the smaller echo of a laugh, as if they were performing a duet. Elizabeth leaned back, smirk tugging at her lips. She wasn't here to play their game. She was here for Jane. Still, if they wanted war, she was happy to lace up her boots, mud and all. The conversation turned to society gossip. Who was in town, who had danced with whom, who had worn what at the last ball. Elizabeth responded when necessary, but her mind wandered. She noticed Darcy's silence like a shadow at the edge of the room. He wasn't listening exactly. He wasn't participating either. But his eyes, dark and steady, kept drifting toward her, like he was studying her without permission. And that's when Elizabeth had a dangerous thought. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't only judging her. Maybe he was curious. Maybe he was, God forbid, impressed. She shoved the thought away immediately. "Absolutely not," she muttered under her breath. "Pardon?" "Oh, nothing. Just admiring the decor. So symmetrical." Caroline looked pleased, as if the compliment had been genuine. Elizabeth almost laughed. Dinner was announced, and the group migrated to the dining room, where the performance continued. The Bingley sisters praised Darcy's elegance, Darcy stayed silent, and Bingley, bless him, beamed at everyone like a golden retriever who had just discovered tennis balls. Elizabeth, sitting across from Darcy, made it a game. Every time he glanced at her, she raised her brows a fraction, daring him to look away first. He never did. By the end of the evening, Elizabeth was tired, damp, and deeply annoyed. Yet somehow she walked away with a new energy. Because if Fitzwilliam Darcy wanted to keep staring, keep judging, keep hovering like a storm cloud, fine. She could outlast him. She could outstare him. She could out-sarcasm him in her sleep. And in her burn book, written later that night, she added a fresh entry under his name. Emotionally constipated, possibly obsessed, still insufferable. The war wasn't cooling down, it was heating up. Breakfast at Netherfield was not a meal, it was theater. Picture this. Elizabeth Bennet, still stationed at Jane's bedside like the loyal sibling/bodyguard she was, finally ventures down to the dining room. She's running on 4 hours of sleep and a gallon of sarcasm. And what does she find? The Bingley sisters sitting at the table in matching shades of smug, sipping tea like it was imported liquid superiority. Charles Bingley, of course, greeted her like she was royalty. His smile practically lit up the silverware. "Miss Elizabeth, we hope your sister is feeling better." Elizabeth returned the smile, tired but polite, still unwell, but glowing through the fever, as Jane always does. Bingley's grin widened, golden retriever energy strong as ever. You just knew his diary entry that night was going to read, "Jane smiled at me again, wedding incoming." But Darcy, however, sat stiffly across the table, perfectly put together at an hour when most men would still be drooling into their pillows. His coffee remained untouched, steam curling upward like it was afraid of him. He glanced at Elizabeth briefly, then back to his plate, as if acknowledging his existence might require paperwork. Caroline pounced on the silence. "How admirable, Miss Bennet, that you would stay by your sister all night. Most young ladies would wilt under such circumstances." Her tone implied Elizabeth was somewhere between nursemaid and peasant. Elizabeth, without missing a beat, speared a piece of toast. "Well, I suppose we Bennet girls don't wilt easily. We're more of the weed variety, resilient." Caroline's smile faltered. Louisa stifled a laugh that sounded suspiciously like a cough. Darcy's mouth twitched. Not a smile, but dangerously close. Elizabeth caught it. Oh, she caught it. And in her mind, that tiny flicker of amusement was practically a confession. Maybe the man wasn't made of stone after all. Still, breakfast dragged. Caroline kept tossing shade like confetti, sneaking compliments about Jane that were really about herself, and Elizabeth volleyed them back with deadly calm. Darcy said almost nothing, but his eyes kept wandering in Elizabeth's direction, subtle, steady, infuriating. And then came the great book debate of Netherfield. Caroline, desperate to prove her sophistication, launched into a monologue about her personal library. "Of course, I read a great many books, though I flatter myself that I prefer those of true elegance, not the cheap little novels one finds cluttering shelves these days." Elizabeth tilted her head, eyes glinting. "Oh, I'm very fond of novels, especially the cheap little ones." Caroline's teacup froze in mid-air. "Really?" "Absolutely. A well-written novel," Elizabeth said sweetly, "is one of the most divine pleasures. But then again, not everyone has the stamina for more than titles." Darcy looked up sharply. For the first time in days, he spoke without hesitation. "Miss Elizabeth is correct. The novel form is far from trivial." The room stilled. Caroline blinked, Louisa blinked, Elizabeth blinked. Did Fitzwilliam Darcy, King of Disdain, Emperor of Silence, just agree with her? Out loud? In front of witnesses? Elizabeth smirked into her teacup. Oh, the material this was going to add to her burn book. Caroline recovered quickly, plastering on a smile. "Well, of course, if Mr. Darcy admires novels, then naturally they must have merit." Elizabeth nearly choked on her tea. The hypocrisy was Olympic level. She wanted to applaud. After breakfast, Elizabeth slipped back upstairs to Jane, still glowing in her feverish haze. "Don't worry," Lizzie whispered, tucking the blanket higher. "Mom will plan your bridal shower whether you live or die." Jane laughed weakly, which only made her love her more. But the truth was unavoidable.
Staying at Netherfield meant more Darcy time, more silent stares, more accidental debates, more tension so thick you could spread it on toast. And Elizabeth was low-key obsessed with hating every second of it. Some girls get swept into romance by candlelight and ballrooms. Elizabeth Bennet was being swept in by passive-aggressive breakfast and a man whose version of flirting looks suspiciously like glaring, which, if you ask me, is somehow more entertaining. Because while Jane dreamed delicate dreams upstairs, Elizabeth was downstairs writing the first chapters of a war novel, and Fitzwilliam Darcy didn't even realize he was already cast as her enemy number one.